Strich. Drop of blood, the announcement. It was late in the evening at Greenfield High School. The hallways were unusually quiet, echoing only with the faint hum of fluorescent lights. A few classrooms were still occupied, students finishing projects, some revising for upcoming exams, while teachers graded papers in silence. Outside, the sun was sinking, casting long shadows through the tall windows, painting the corridors with fading streaks of gold.
Everything felt ordinary, calm. Until the sound came.
The intercom system crackled suddenly, bursting into static that made everyone flinch. At first, it was nothing but distorted noise, like an old radio struggling to find a station. But then, cutting through the static, came a deep, distorted voice. Lockdown. This is not a drill.
The words froze the air.
Every head in every classroom turned toward the ceiling speakers, as if doubting what they had just heard. Some students whispered nervously, laughing half-heartedly, trying to convince themselves it was a prank. But the teachers' faces told a different story, pale, grim, and serious. One teacher immediately locked the classroom door, snapping the bolt into place.
Another shot of the lights, leaving only the dim glow of dusk filtering in through the blinds.
Stay quiet, a teacher whispered urgently. Do not make a sound. Fear began to spread. Some students pulled out their phones to call home, only to find their screens flickering with weak signal bars that vanished the moment they tried dialing.
The silence grew heavier.
Every faint creak of the building, every buzzing light fixture, now sounded sinister. The school didn't feel like a school anymore. It felt like a trap. Whispers passed from one student to another. Was there an intruder? Was it a shooter? Why wasn't this a drill? The words, not a drill, echoed endlessly in their minds, twisting the calm atmosphere into a suffocating terror. Something was wrong, horribly wrong, and everyone knew it. Strich. Drop of blood, footsteps in the hallway. The silence after the announcement was unbearable. Every classroom sat in darkness, students holding their breath as if even the faintest sound might give them away. For several long minutes, there was nothing but the buzzing of the old ceiling lights. Then it began. At first, it was faint, so faint that some thought they were imagining it. A dull thud.
A dragging scrape.
Then again. Closer this time. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway, uneven and slow, as if someone were dragging one foot behind them. The sound grew louder with each step, bouncing off the walls of the deserted corridor. Students huddled closer together, their hearts hammering. A few dared to peer through the narrow window on the classroom door, but the hallway beyond was empty. Still, the steps continued.
Toot, scrape, toot, scrape.
It wasn't just footsteps anymore. Along the polished floor, faint streaks began to appear. Something was leaving a trail, dark, wet, and glistening in the dim emergency lights that flickered overhead.
Blood.
The teachers tried to steady their voices, whispering for everyone to stay still, but even they were trembling. The footsteps didn't follow a steady rhythm. Sometimes they stopped completely, only to start again suddenly, closer than before. It was as if whoever, or whatever, was moving out there knew they were listening. A girl sitting near the door clamped her hands over her mouth, fighting back tears. A boy squeezed his fists so tight his knuckles turned white. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Then, without warning, the footsteps stopped directly outside their door.
Silence.
Every student leaned in, straining to hear. Then came a sound that sent chills crawling up their spines, a slow, deliberate dragging of fingers across the door, leaving behind faint, wet smears. Something was out there.
Vomiting, bleeding.
And it was searching. Drop of blood, the first glimpse.
For endless seconds, no one dared to move.
The dragging sound outside the door had stopped, but the air inside the classroom was suffocating, heavy with fear. Every heartbeat felt loud enough to give them away. Then, without warning, a shadow moved past the thin strip of glass in the door. A collective gasp rippled through the students, quickly muffled by trembling hands. Someone was out there. The shadow returned, slower this time. And then, finally, they saw him. Through the narrow window, illuminated by the flickering hallway lights, a tall figure came into view. His clothes were shredded, soaked in dark stains that spread across his chest and sleeves. His skin was unnaturally pale, almost gray, and his face, What little they could see of it was smeared with blood. His eyes were hollow, unfocused, like glassy orbs staring through the world rather than at it. In his hand, he dragged something long and metallic. With every step, it scraped against the floor, leaving sparks as it clanged against tiles. The students froze in their seats. One boy instinctively reached for the teacher's arm, his hand shaking uncontrollably. The teacher's lips moved silently, "Don't move." The figure stopped directly in front of their door. He tilted his head slightly, like an animal sniffing the air. For a terrifying moment, it felt as though he could hear their very thoughts. His bloody fingers rose and tapped against the glass. Once. Twice. Slowly. Each tap echoed like a gunshot inside their chests. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, the man drifted past their door, dragging his weapon along with him. The sound of scraping metal and the faint trail of blood followed him down the hallway. The students exhaled in unison, but no relief came. If this was their first glimpse, what else was waiting in the shadows of the school?
The silent fear.
The classroom was shrouded in near darkness, only faint stripes of moonlight cutting through the blinds. Students sat frozen at their desks, every muscle tense, listening for the sound of footsteps returning. The figure had vanished down the hallway, but his presence lingered like a poisonous fog. A teacher whispered, barely audible, "Stay quiet. Don't use your phones." Her voice trembled despite her efforts to remain calm. Everyone obeyed, clutching their bags, their hands, or their mouths to keep from making the slightest noise. One by one, students tried to check their phones anyway, hoping to send a desperate message to their families. But to their horror, every screen flickered, battery icons drained in seconds, as if something was feeding on the power. Some devices went completely black the moment they turned them on. It was as if the building itself was swallowing every signal, every escape. A boy seated by the window thought he saw movement in the courtyard below. His eyes widened. Another shadow was gliding across the playground, too tall and too distorted to belong to any teacher or student. He turned away quickly, pressing his back to the wall, silently praying it hadn't noticed him. Meanwhile, the silence grew heavier, more unbearable than the footsteps had been.
The sound of a pencil rolling off a desk made everyone jump.
Even their own breathing felt like thunder. Then came the tapping again. Soft. Rhythmic. Moving from door to door down the hallway. The bloody man was still searching. Each tap grew louder as it drew closer to their classroom. The teacher pressed a finger to her lips, tears welling in her eyes. No one moved. No one even blinked. The tapping stopped outside their door. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then, slowly, the handle began to rattle. The disappearance. The rattling at the door lasted only a few seconds, but to the students inside, it felt like an eternity. Then, without warning, it stopped. Silence returned, pressing down on the classroom like a heavy weight. No one dared to move, not even to breathe deeply. For what felt like hours, the figure's presence loomed in the hallway, and then, just as suddenly, it was gone. Minutes stretched endlessly until the distant wail of sirens broke the tension. Red and blue lights flashed faintly through the blinds. Relief swept over the students. The police had arrived. Teachers quietly motioned for everyone to remain still until it was safe. The sound of boots thundered through the building as officers called out, checking rooms one by one. Finally, their door opened to reveal uniformed police, weapons drawn but faces confused. The students were herded out, clutching their belongings, eyes darting nervously to every shadow. But when they looked down the hallway where the figure had stood only minutes before, there was nothing. No man, no dragging weapon, no sign of forced entry. The corridors were empty. Almost. On every classroom door, smeared across the handles and glass, were bloody handprints. Long streaks of crimson marked where fingers had dragged down the wood. Some prints were fresh and glistening, others looked smeared, as if the figure had pressed his face close to the glass. The police searched every corner of the school, storage rooms, stairwells, bathrooms, even the roof. But the man was gone, as if he had melted into the shadows. False alarm, one officer muttered, though his pale face betrayed disbelief. But the students knew better. They had seen him. They had heard him. And the bloody marks remained, proof that something had been there. something that was still searching.
The return home.
Mia sat quietly in the back seat of her parents' car, her hands trembling as they drove her home from the school. The flashing lights of police cars still burned in her memory, and the image of those bloody handprints clung to her thoughts like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Her parents tried to reassure her, "It's over now. You're safe." But the words felt hollow. She didn't believe them. At home, Mia locked her bedroom door and sat on her bed, hugging her knees.
The house was quiet, tokquiet.
Every creak of the wooden floor, every whistle of the wind outside, made her flinch. She tried turning on the TV, the noise filling the silence, but her mind kept replaying the sound of footsteps dragging across the school hallway. Hours passed.
Mitternacht crept in.
Her parents were asleep, the house submerged in darkness. Mia lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her body tense. Then she heard it.
Tut, skräp. Tut, skräp.
Her blood ran cold. The sound was faint at first, distant, but unmistakable. The same uneven footsteps she had heard at school. She sat up, heart hammering against her ribs, praying she was imagining it. But the sound grew louder. Closer. It was inside the house.
Mia klemmt a Hand over her Mut, Stiefling ACY.
Slowly, the footsteps reached her bedroom door. For a moment, there was silence, then a faint scratching against the wood, as though bloody fingers were tracing along its surface. Her phone buzzed suddenly on the nightstand, the screen lighting up the dark room. She grabbed it, desperate to call for help, but before she could, the battery drained instantly to black. She was alone. The footsteps were still there. And the door handle began to turn. Drop of blood, the final reveal. Mia's heart pounded so loudly she thought it would give her away. The bedroom door handle rattled once, then fell still. For a long moment, there was silence, and she almost dared to hope. Maybe it was gone. Then came the sound again. Thud, scrape. Thud, scrape. The uneven footsteps moved across her room. But how? The door was still closed. Her blood ran cold as she realized the thing was already inside. Panicked, she slipped off her bed and crawled underneath, pressing her body flat against the floorboards. Dust filled her lungs, but she didn't dare cough. From her hiding place, she saw them, bloody footprints, wet and glistening, appearing one by one on the hardwood floor. No one was walking. They were just manifesting, as if invisible feet were pacing her room. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her hand. The screen lit up, casting a pale glow under the bed. A notification appeared. Lockdown. This is not a drill. Her stomach dropped. She tried turning the phone off, but it refused, buzzing again, brighter this time. The glow spread, flickering like static, illuminating the dark space around her. Slowly, the footprints stopped. The room grew colder, heavy with the scent of iron. Then, from the gap beneath the bed, Mia saw them, two pale, blood-smeared feet standing inches from her face. She squeezed her eyes shut, tears spilling silently, willing herself to vanish. The phone vibrated once more, the screen now showing her own number calling her. Static hissed through the speaker, and beneath it, a whisper, "Mia." She opened her eyes just as a hand, dripping blood, reached down and slid under the bed. The last thing she saw before the screen went black was the same message repeating over and over. Lockdown. This is not a drill. The final reveal, full story, 335 words. Mia's heart pounded so loudly she thought it would give her away. The bedroom door handle rattled once, then fell still. For a long moment, there was silence.